In today's video, I'm going to take a closer look at the Canon R5 and the EOS R5C to see what the key differences are for us video shooters. I'm AJ, this is 120fps and welcome to our weird camera geeky corner part of the internet where normally there's me and Pete, but he's in coronavirus jail, so it's just me going slowly insane, talking to myself in the corner of a room. Yeah, it's been a long time. So yes, the R5C from Canon was released, and yes, as it is Canon, there were some cripple hammers that we all heard about. Smash! Canon can't just help themselves, can they? But also, not just crippling the camera itself with some weird features missing, they also seem to have released a camera that slightly undermines some of their other offerings. We're going to talk about all that and a little bit more in this video, but primarily what I want to look at is the Canon R5 C and the Canon R5. Are they the same camera? What are the key differences? And really, has there been any noticeable differences for us video shooters? Is it worth the difference? Was it worth the upgrade? And was it worth Canon undermining the entire cinema range of cameras for this release? Now, in recent videos, I have speculated that perhaps the R5C was a knee-jerk reaction from Canon to try and make good the bad press that the original R5 got, especially from us video shooters. One thing's for certain, it was a landmark move from them to combine the photography part of their business and the cinema range of cameras. And one thing that's slightly worrying from a Canon perspective is that the R5C potentially undermines the cinema range of cameras. For certain, anyone that bought a C70 in the past year is going to be slightly annoyed because those cameras almost seem to offer the same thing, but the R5 has got a little added feature and is slightly cheaper. So it does undermine the C70's place in the market. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the R5 and the R5C and what the key differences are. And the first one, the one that has got people most confused, the Canon Cripple hammer, as some people are calling it, and that's the admission of IBIS. So yes, the R5C has a fixed sensor. It doesn't have a floating stabilized sensor that we were expecting from mirrorless cameras from Canon, but this is more than a mirrorless camera, isn't it? This is part of their cinema range, and as such, it has a fixed sensor. Those fixed sensors are the norm from Canon's cinema cameras. So when we saw that it had the C in it and it was going to be part of the cinema range, we shouldn't be that surprised that IBIS was missing. And in their defense, slightly, I know I'll probably get shot down for this, but the electronic image stabilization that we see in some of the other Canon cinema cameras is actually really good. So it's worth bearing that in mind before you get too angry that IBIS is missing. And then moving on to the big one, and that is of course unlimited 8K recording or 4K 120 if you choose to do so with audio. This was a big deal, and this was potentially why I thought it was perhaps a knee-jerk reaction from Canon to do the R5C, because obviously the R5 was plagued with all of the bad reaction to that limited recording time that it had in 8K modes. Now, this doesn't come without any caveats. The first caveat, of course, is the huge fan on the back of the camera. It does make it very big on the back, and of course it does reduce the weather sealing capabilities of this camera. For most video shooters, that's not a huge deal, and we will quite happily accept an external fan. Most video cameras tend to have one. There is one big caveat with 8K shooting, that's the 8K 60 requires you to use an external power supply. For a mirrorless hybrid camera, an external power supply may well be an issue because I can't imagine many people shooting in studios. So potentially you're going to have to attach it to a very big battery grip, which reduces the portability of this camera, which then makes me ask the question, why would you use this camera when you could potentially use something that's more fully formed for that kind of thing? To be fair though, 8K 60 is a very niche format. Of course it grabs the headlines, but I can't imagine many people shooting in 8K 60 for long durations at least. At least I can't imagine myself doing it, and I'm really narrow-minded, so what I don't do, no one does, so therefore it's fine. And with that kind of selfish shooting in mind, one big thing about this camera that is different from all others that Canon have released, including the R5, that actually makes it worthwhile, and that is the oversampling 8K in all other recording modes. Up until this point, I've failed to see the need to shoot in 8K. In fact, I think I'm going to do a whole video about why it's totally useless. Yeah, shoot me down in the comments if you like. I'm standing by that statement. But the Canon R5 C uses 8K oversampling in all other recording modes. That includes the 4K and, really importantly, 1080. Now, for anyone that thinks 1080 is totally archaic, they've not done any long or large format professional work where you still use 1080 quite regularly, and you want a very good 1080. The fact that this uses an oversampled 8K for that 1080p image is huge, especially if we're going to be shooting things, let's say podcasts. You want really good quality, sharp images. Now you're going to have it. And for the first time, I can really, truly see the benefit of having an 8K camera for that oversampling in different video modes. A huge difference between the R5 and the R5 C, especially for us video shooters, was the introduction to the dual native ISO, or what Canon have called dual base ISO modes. This is massive and enables us to shoot so much more detail and clean images in lower lights and native ISOs. I'm so glad it's there. My first real hands-on experience with it was with the Lumix S1H, and it blew me away how much difference it makes having a dual base ISO for your camera, especially when you're shooting at nighttime or outdoors in the evening. This is going to be massive for people using the R5C. Absolutely phenomenal addition and a huge difference from the original R5. Okay, so let's talk about the autofocus system. The R5 uses the dual pixel CMOS autofocus 2 system, which has vehicle and animal eye detect autofocus enabled. Now the R5C does have that when you're in photo mode. However, when you switch over to video mode, it uses the dual pixel CMOS autofocus 1, which doesn't have vehicle or animal eye detection. Not really a big deal, but it is an interesting difference, and it actually is there for one really big reason, and that's the other big difference between the R5 and the R5C, is that there's two operating systems happening at the same time in this camera, and they switch when you change between photo and video mode. So that's why if anyone's seen or used the camera, they'll know that it takes about 10 seconds to change modes. So not particularly good for on-the-fly shooting. And that's because the camera is shutting down and then restarting in the new operating system. The really big giveaway that it's doing that is the change of menu layout. So when you're in photo mode, it looks like a Canon DSLR's menu, very familiar. And when you switch over to video mode, it looks like the Canon C range of cameras menus. It looks like a C70. And then you have the addition of all the waveforms, the vectors, and the focus peaking that you're used to for us video shooters that aren't there when you're in photo mode. So it has two operating systems and two autofocus systems attached to those, depending on the mode that you're in. And I guess the final big difference for us video shooters is the recording codec that is used. Gone is the necessity to shoot in HEVC or H.265 if you want that 10-bit C-Log profile. On the R5, you were forced to shoot in H.265, which in of itself isn't a massive deal until you get to editing, or perhaps you're sharing the files with a post-production house or editor. H.265 is an absolute nightmare to work with in a post-production environment. It's really processor intensive and clunky, and some video editors are still struggling to use it. That's gone in the R5C. You're not forced to use that when you're in C-Log anymore. They've reintroduced the XFAV-C codec when you're shooting in that 10-bit C-Log. And that's brilliant because that's been a standard of codec used in non-linear editors for the longest time. So pretty much everyone and every computer will be able to cope with that really well. And that's actually just a huge deal for us video shooters. So that's a really welcome addition into the R5C. The final thing to talk about really is the price, and I've written it down here so I don't get it wrong because you guys always shoot me down when I get things wrong. We've got the R5 at $4,300, the R5C at $4,500, and the C70, I put this in the list as well, at $4,800. The reason I put the C70 there is because clearly the R5C is an addition to the cinema range of cameras, but it's an addition at just £300 less than the C70. The C70 does offer a couple of things different. We have built-in NDs, so that's quite a big deal for us video shooters. Of course, you have the top handle, it's ergonomics, they're just a lot more well-suited for video shooters. But I'm wondering, does the R5C now undermine that part of the market entirely and render the C7 useless? Or is the C70 that much of a step up that the R5C is useless in itself? I'm curious to know what you guys think. If any of you are C70 users or R5 users, where do you see the place in the market for the R5C? And is it worthy? Does it undermine what already exists? Did you buy an R5 and regret it? Did you buy a C70 and are regretting it now? Or does the R5C have no place at all? Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm really interested about this one. I'm still scratching my head, and until Canon reply to an email from me, which, let's face it, they're never going to do, I won't know what it's like to use until, I don't know, we rent one or something, and that's probably going to be a good year away until the stock's actually released. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling on. Get back to your day, back to your work, whatever it is you're doing, back to being on the toilet, which, let's face it, that's probably where you look at me most, and not in a good way. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.